Welcome, and thank you for joining for another whiskey review. Today, we're going to take a look at the Glen Scotia Victoriana. 2015 bottling, comes in at 51.5% ABV. Dustin, bottle you've had for a while.
Yeah.
Has well for a few years. We've had it a few times. I've always commented how long this bottle is.
It's also pretty heavy, too.
Yeah. This is a substantial bottle, even for a guy who lifts weights on a daily basis. This feels like something should be.
You know, the funny thing for me, Mike, is I've got most of the core range of Glen Scotia at home, and this one's like 2 inches taller than all the other bottles, and I don't know why.
Substantial. Glen Scotia, if you guys don't know, this is Campbelltown whiskey. This is the other Campbelltown, as I always like to say. So it's not Springbank, and it's not what's Kilkerran's
Glengyle, yeah.
Glengyle Distillery. So it is the Glen Scotia because they need 3 to be a region.
3 to be a region. I think that's why Glengyle got opened.
Yeah, so we saw on the Whiskey Tube they do a Scotch Whiskey Awards of the Year.
Roy and Ralphie, yeah.
They put on a nice little show, and a lot of the whiskey tubers do it. So they have this more current version. Is there whiskey of the year this year?
Well, if you look at the way that whole thing's structured, Mike, one of my gripes with the way they do it is they're not very clear on, for whiskey of the year, it's like, oh, well, I can get it still.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, so which batch, they don't really kind of go into that.
Sure.
But that also makes it more approachable for because thousands of people go online and actually vote.
Sure.
So it makes it more approachable. So this...
Yeah, when we saw this, I was like, hey, man, do you have one of these? And you're like, yeah, I've had one for years. We've had them. I'm like, oh, that's right. Oh, well, bring it on.
Yeah, we wanted to bring it to you guys. We haven't really gotten into Glen Scotia, Mike. We're probably going to clean that up. In fact, our Instagram, the photo is actually an independent bottle of Glen Scotia that I have, and we've not brought it to you guys yet. We've had it a couple times here.
So many whiskeys to get to, Dustin.
Exactly.
It looks like dense gold.
Yeah, and I don't...
Beautiful color.
Off the top of my head, Mike, I can't remember the maturation on this one, but the big thing is that they finish it in deeply charred oak barrels. So, tell me on the nose, are you picking up deep char? Because I sure don't. Man, my first thought when I smell this thing is, oh my God, it's like crushed grapes. This is what I would think it smells like at a winery when they're like, I've seen those old videos where the person's walking on grapes. It's that level of grape.
There's a Chateau Elan in Georgia, just northwest of Atlanta. I went there one time, so before I went, I watched a YouTube video they had, and 2 women were crushing grapes on a stand, and one of them fell off, and it was like an all-time great YouTube comedy video.
Nice.
But I've always thought when I hear about crushing grapes, I always think about that movie, The Odyssey, from 1950s, 1960s, where they tricked the Cyclops. Anyway, getting off topic here. Yeah, there is something very blue grape-ish to this for sure. So which make me think sherry cask.
I do get some toasted spices in on the finish, but I mean, I gotta say, man, it's unique. In fact, if you just handed me this and said, "What do you smell?" I don't think I would tell you whiskey.
Come on.
No, I really don't. I mean, I think I would be thinking maybe it's like a cognac where it's got some of that grapey note that we're talking about.
It does have a strong grape. But there is a very barley-rich character to this.
As you dig in, I am starting to pick that up. You're right. But at first, I didn't get it at all. It takes a minute to kind of get in there.
It is, at first I was kind of picking up a couple of those things. To me, it was kind of recognizable as a Campbelltown whiskey at first. But then you're right. It got very sickly sweet as I was going through that monologue of stepping on grapes. But then the sweetness kind of subsided a little bit now. But it did get kind of, I don't want to say sickly sweet, but very blue grape sweet specifically.
Yeah. Now, one thing I have noticed with Glen Scotia is that it's an incredibly fruity distillery, and even when they don't put they just use a bourbon cask, it'll come off like they use sherry casks sometimes. So it doesn't shock me that it's incredibly fruity here, even though they've put it in crazy charred casks. They're saying
it almost smells purple. Now some of the chars are coming up a little bit. Now I'm getting a little bit of char and a little bit of ash on the nose. Because we've had this before. You're right. I've always kind of thought undistinct. You know what I mean? Easy drinking, but undistinct.
Ooh.
A little bready note on the nose. What are you picking up with?
Yeah, so palate, man. I get the charred cask, and only because I've had enough Glen Scotia and some independent Glen Scotia that I know Glen Scotia is an incredibly fruity distillery. Am I able to even understand that that's charred oak that's doing so much? Because it's working miracles here to take their incredibly fruity malt and add that big, bold spice up front. And then it transitions. Again, it's starting to remind me of sherry. I don't know if they use any sherry in this one. But it starts transitioning into a red fruits. Christmas notes, and then the charred oak comes back in and gives you even more spice. Finish a little bit kind of lacking. I mean, it's here, it's good, but it's a little less than I was expecting from the up front.
Yeah, aside from that, I'll say you get a nice little wallop of lemon and vanilla along with that. And that vanilla note is kind of reminiscent of a bourbon cask to me. But the lemon note is pretty strong on the mid palate. I agree with it at first, but then as soon as you swallow the mid palate, came in with lemon, and then here at the end, nice little oak note. It's a little bready, a little barley, a little rich. The lemon comes back here on the finish a little bit.
Ooh, pine tree I just got. Big pine tree, almost like a Christmas tree.
Let's put a little bit of water in this cask strength whiskey.
Christmas tree and almost like a vanilla glue, if that makes any sense. Like it's not an offensive glue, but it's like
it's a dense whiskey.
A little bit of Elmer's glue, but it's like vanilla-y too. It's actually kind of good.
Yeah, I kind of thought it was more.
I just like it.
I thought it was more of a vanilla oak, but yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. We're kicking around the same thing.
Ooh, water just brought that barley way out in front on the nose.
Yeah, I was trying to think. Was it funky or was it just like gritty barley?
I think it's gritty barley, man. I'm not saying Glen Scotia doesn't have funk because I think it does, but this one's very different. We got to bring you guys the 15 year. That's my favorite in the line, but the timing just made sense for this one.
Yeah.
Also, we got to buy more 15.
Yeah. Before initially, when I nosed it, I said there was something Campbelltown I could recognize. I was kind of thinking more of a dirty characteristic, and I'm gonna call this gritty barley, and it kind of comes off very similar, but it is different.
Yeah, Glen Scotia is definitely distinctly their own distillery for sure.
Yeah, what I thought was funk is more just barley.
Now with water, man, all I'm getting is a little bit of charred oak and barley.
Yeah, the fruit notes really step back.
Incredible how you could even get rid of that fruit note.
You would think with water that would show the distillery character a little bit more.
Usually water brings out fruits too.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm wondering if maybe 15, 20 minutes in the glass after the water gets time, it'll bring that fruit right back.
Possibly. It'll be a little rough with it here. What'd this
Barley
run?
sugar. Huh?
What'd this run?
About 100. I don't know what they're going for these days. I mean, it was a while ago. They might be 120 now, but...
Cask strength whiskey. That's a substantial amount of glass.
Well, I mean, the base, is actually pretty thick, too, if you look at that.
It's a substantial amount of glass.
Yeah. Actually, it's kind of cool the way the base looks. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's the green see-through gets really dark and murky there at the bottom.
Yes.
It's a nice bottle.
Mm-hmm. It's getting a tad bit more minerality and a little bit of salinity to it with the water as well. The fruitiness is completely gone. It becomes more recognizable as a coastal whiskey with a little bit of water to it.
I was thinking actually more like you're at a pond.
Mossy.
Yeah, mossy,
Mineral.
there's stuff growing. I'm not getting a ton of the mineral, but I'm getting the moss.
It's coming now. But the moss, you're right. Almost reminds me of like a Lagavulin moss, like moss on stone sort of smell.
Yeah, I don't get any of the Kilkerran and Springbanks, I tend to get just a little bit of sea salt coming through. None of that here. It's much more like this was aged by a pond.
It's pretty good whiskey.
I'd have to look on the map and see exactly where Glen Scotia is. Maybe they are a little more inland. But also I've got to look at not just where the distillery is, but where the barrels age. Ooh, that just got really funky like lime.
The citrus note is
but it's kind of good.
Yeah, the citrus note is getting funky now.
Yeah, it's getting real funky. I don't know if that's mineral or again, it's like you're in an old bookstore, but there's like something like some of the pages got a little mildewed.
And someone's cleaning in the next room. It hasn't made it to your room yet, but it's coming. And they're using lemon pledge.
It's a lime pledge. I don't know if it's not a thing, but they made it for this bookstore. I kind of dig it though, man. I really dig it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all in all, man, I don't have anything negative to say about this whiskey. I don't, but it's a tough one to kind of work through, Mike.
Here's the thing. It's a fun whiskey. It has a really good mouthfeel, which cask strength. You know what I'm saying? I think there was some casks that were probably middle-aged, 12, 14, maybe 15, 16 years old. Probably some younger whiskey in this give a little bit of that bite still.
It's got a hell of a bite.
Yeah. Well, you could tell me the youngest whiskeys in this are 15, and I'd believe you. Dense, rich, barley. That lemon note's really nice. That lemon note's continued to build and kind of go in a few different ways. Mm-hmm. The sweetness isn't like a candied sweetness or isn't a sugared sweetness, not to me. It's more of a artificial grape type of wine sweetness a little bit. which with water that really dissipated. But it's a fun whiskey. It's an interesting whiskey.
A lot of spices. I mean, that's kind of the showcase here for me, is just that.
But the spices,
really spicy.
Very manageable. You know what? This is a good whiskey that if you want to go looking for something, you can find it. Mm-hmm. If you don't put water in it, you can get a sweet whiskey out of this.
Yeah.
If you want a kind of a barley forward Campbelltown whiskey, I can see that. With water, there's some little bit of coastal and salinity to it. Mossy, stone, early morning dampness to it. Damp wood a little bit. It's fun whiskey. Where does as far as score on this one?
Yeah, that's where I'm struggling here, Mike.
Let me go first.
Go for it, buddy.
Okay, so I have been between two scores for a decent time as soon as we had water, and that's 87 and 88. I'm going to call it an 88. It's a really enjoyable whiskey. It helps the fact that it's cask strength. Mm-hmm. It doesn't do anything I'm like, oh, wow, super, you know what I mean? I'm not blown away by any aspect of it. So from a flavor perspective, I could rate this lower. That's why I was considering like an 87 or even an 86, because the flavors aren't incredible on this by any stretch of the imagination. But as I've rated mouthful, it is super oily. And everything here is still at least pretty fairly well constructed. As I mentioned earlier, you can get a Campbelltown, or you can get a coastal whiskey, or you can get kind of a sweet whiskey, depending on the type of water you add to it or what you try to focus on as far as what you're smelling. The mouthfeel, taste, I like the lemon. It is an amazing. I like it better on the nose than I do the palate. I'm giving it an 87 on the palate. I'm giving it an 89 on the nose. I'm at an 88.
So I've gone through literally every score from an 85 to an 88 on this one, Mike. And I keep trying to come back to it. And here's where I'm struggling. I like the nose. Then I don't like it. I like the palate for a minute. Then it gets too spicy. I add water. It shifts things around. I don't know what I'm getting. And I keep coming back to this, Mike. This is not a whiskey that I go back to. I've had this a long time. I'll pour it. I'll have one pour. Never another pour. It's not a whiskey that it invites me to keep going back to, but it's so rich, so complex, so interesting. So I'm going to give it an 87, kind of right there in the middle, on the high, actually middle high side, because I do think it's got enough going on. It's just a whiskey for me. I'm not going to pour very often, and I'm glad I've got it, and that's why this is a 2015 bottle, and I haven't had the new ones.
So I will say this: I gave it the high end of my range for this reason. Every time we have this whiskey, you're right, it isn't memorable based on the whiskeys we're having. Mm-hmm. But it's not something that stands out as a whiskey like, oh man, don't bring that whiskey again.
No, I mean...
So here, when we had a chance to focus on it, I'm not blown away by any one aspect of it. But I can recognize there's quality here. Mm-hmm. We need to try more from this distillery, though. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I've got the 15, I've got the 18, and I've got... another NAS that they use a lot more sherry on. And then we've got a 28-year-old independent. Yeah. So we have some good ones from this distillery coming. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. This is a good whiskey. Will I remember this whiskey a year from now? Probably not. I think every time I go back to it, I've forgotten it, and then I remember instantly, oh, that's that really spicy, fruity one. Yeah, that's a different whiskey.
Yeah, but depending on...
That's right, you forget about it.
Yeah, you forget about it. Yeah, maybe the whiskeys that we drink on a regular basis, but, it's probably a solid whiskey for what you pay for it and what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little surprised that this won an award. Not that it's a bad whiskey, because it's a really nice whiskey. I'm just a little...
What was this cost again?
Again, like I said, I bought this years ago. I paid $100. I think they got to be more expensive now, but...
150 sounds about right.
If it's 150, I don't think it's a terrible
88,
price.
150, $200, that sounds about right. It's cask strength whiskey.
I would not pay $200 for this.
Not now. I agree.
No.
Anyway, those are our thoughts on the whiskey. If you guys had a chance to try this one, and I know a lot of people apparently in the whiskey community have, let us know what you guys think on the one. I haven't watched any reviews on it. I wanted to, give an unvarnished
Let us know
opinion.
if this is a better or worse bottle than the current ones.
Yeah, 2015.
I'll go pick up a new bottle if they've gotten way better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But again, this isn't bad. This is just mean on the road, cask strength whiskey.
Quality
cask strength.
Quality cask strength whiskey.
I agree. All right, those are our thoughts on the whiskey. If you guys want to try this one, let us know what you guys think. Dustin, until next time, what do we wish the folks?
Happy award-winning drinking.
See you next time.